The prophet Ezekiel, who penned chapter 37, spent his whole ministry in the land of Babylon. Ezekiel had been taken captive along with King Jehoiakim of Judah and thousands of others 11 years before Jerusalem fell. There, in the land of Babylon, Ezekiel prophesied both before the city of Jerusalem fell and after it fell. You could say that Ezekiel had two main difficulties in his ministry. First of all, before Jerusalem fell, and he was prophesying that it was going to fall, the people wouldn't believe him. No, it's not going to fall. And they opposed him. Then, after it fell, he prophesied that God would restore them back to the promised land, and the people said, oh no, that's never going to happen. We're all finished. It's all over. Such is man's blindness that whatever God says, he instinctively believes the exact opposite. This is necessary as a background for this celebrated passage of the Valley of Dry Bones in Ezekiel 37. This is particularly vivid, as visions typically are. It's also one of the few well-known passages in Ezekiel. Many would struggle to name another passage in Ezekiel, but this, if they know any passage, is probably the one bit they do know. This passage also deals with predictive prophecy, and so with eschatology, what's going to happen in the days after this oracle was delivered. Let's consider then the Valley of Dry Bones. First, the content of this vision. Second, the fulfillment of this vision. And third, the application of this vision. The Valley of Dry Bones. The content, the fulfillment, and the application of this vision. So what did Ezekiel see in this vision? In verse 1 we read, "The hand of the Lord was upon me." That's vision language. "And the hand of the Lord carried me out in the spirit of the Lord," vision language, "and set me down in the midst of the valley which was full of bones." There was no literal physical body somewhere around Babylon where there were these bones, but it was in the vision, in the spirit. Ezekiel was transported and saw these things, and especially here these bones. Let's try to count these bones. Verse 1 says that the valley was full of them. In verse 2, God makes Ezekiel walk around the valley. And then the prophet declares there are very many of them. And what's the condition of these bones? Because there are different sorts of bones. Were these bones upon which still were hanging parts of flesh? No. Were these fresh bones with flecks of blood still on them? No. These bones were dry bones. Very dry. These were bones which had been bleached with the sun and dried by the wind over many years. So dry were these bones that they were beginning to flake and crumble. At the touch you could rub them, and they would fall away into dust. For dust we are, and to dust we shall all return. What about the position of these bones? These bones were not buried in a grave in the ground, as our practice is. They weren't either set in a cave or a sepulchre, as happened frequently with the Jews, and in such a tomb our Lord was laid. These were bones lying scattered all over the ground. Knee bones, ribs, little bones from the foot, just lying there, higgledy-piggledy, all over the surface, unburied and open to the elements. And let us too, the children as well, enter into this vision. Let's stand in the midst of this valley, surrounded on all sides by these dry bones. Let's walk around this valley, walk through the midst of these bones, and be duly impressed that they are numerous, that they're all very dry, spread all over the ground, visible and awful. You have to get that bit too. This is awful. Because the valley of dry bones is a vision of death, human death. Because these aren't animal bones. This is a vision of the terrible devastation, indeed dissolution of death. There's not a pick of flesh on any of these bones. There's not even a drop of moisture inside the bone. Death. Death hasn't just slain these people. Death has feasted upon them and wasted them all away. Because this is a vision of slaughter. This is a vision of a people slaughtered by sin. Because the wages of sin is death. That's what sin does. It kills people. Ezekiel himself says in chapter 18 verse 3, "The soul that sinneth, it shall die." Here we have a large number of people slain by sin. And God says to Ezekiel, in effect, through this vision, take it all in. Stand there. Walk through this valley. Behold the bones, very dry. See the power of death. And be appalled. Be very appalled at this vision, Ezekiel. But whose bones are they? These bones do not represent the pagan world, though much of the imagery could indeed apply to them. These are not the bones of the Babylonians. These bones represent Israel, the visible people and church of God, as verses 11 and following make abundantly clear. Even more specifically, these bones picture all the 12 tribes of Israel. Verse 11 states, "Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel." The 12 tribes. The 12 tribes in captivity. The northern kingdom carried away captive by the Assyrians. The southern kingdom destroyed by the Babylonians. Some of the people from the north had earlier moved to the south, then been carried captive to the Babylonians. Then these two groups of captive people, the northern kingdom more north and west, and the kingdom of Judah had probably mixed a little bit, at least, in the captivity. But this is a picture of all of them. Dry bones.